Hey good people, what if I told you the government's newest bill uses your kids as an excuse to track everyone? That's exactly what's happening with the new social media ban bill rushed through Parliament on November 21st, 2024. The stated intention of this legislation is to protect children by banning everyone under 16 from accessing social media. No exceptions, no parental approval. But we shouldn't judge a policy by its intentions, rather judge it by its results. Now that this bill is passed, this law will hold social media companies like Facebook and Twitter and TikTok responsible for underage users accessing their platforms. Companies could face penalties of 30,000 penalty points or $9 million for every breach. Penalty points are indexed to inflation, so this fine goes up over time. How will the government enforce this ban? By outsourcing responsibility to social media platforms. Platforms are expected to ensure that no under 16-year-olds access their services. But the interesting thing is, the government hasn't actually told these companies how to do it. There aren't even guidelines for what constitutes as reasonable measures to verify a user's age. Instead, the bill's vague requirements mean platforms must comply or risk crippling fines. Big players like Facebook and TikTok could probably adapt using their vast resources, but smaller, up-and-coming companies might struggle to meet unclear standards, reinforcing the dominance of already established tech giants. This creates fertile ground for regulatory capture, where big corporations lobby the government to tweak rules and it ends up squeezing out their competition. And here's the kicker. This law only prevents teenagers from creating accounts, not from accessing content. A teen without an account can still scroll through TikTok or watch YouTube videos without restriction. So while adults are burdened with intrusive verification demands, teens, the supposed focus of the law, are barely impacted. This isn't just about 15-year-olds. To enforce the ban, companies will need every user to prove their age. The only practical solution? Mandatory digital identity verification for everyone. Gone are the days of just ticking a box to claim that you're over 18. Platforms like Instagram and YouTube may soon require government-approved methods for age verification. This will include providing personal details like your name, birth date, photo ID, or even relying on newer technologies like biometric age estimation or behavioral analysis. This is the type of information you'd usually go to great lengths to protect from scammers, intrusive governments, or, yes, the very social media companies that will be forced to demand them from you. It's ironic that the government's solution to big tech collecting your personal data is to require you to give them even more. And not just verify who you are today. Imagine what these companies might do with records stretching back to when you were 5. Advertisers would be able to target your childhood interests, while data brokers would salivate over the potential profits of selling a cradle-to-grave digital profile. For anyone who's ever hesitated before clicking accept cookies, this law feels like being pickpocketed, except the police are there and they're telling you to hand over your PIN number as well. The results of this bill become even weirder when you find out that YouTube, a platform rich with educational content, falls under the purview of this bill while sites like Pornhub do not. This is the government's attempt at protecting your kids from online harm. YouTube is banned, but not Pornhub. The government justifies this bill by claiming it protects kids from harm on social media. But to do so, they had to redefine harm to extend beyond physical injury and include mental health. Feelings of distress should be avoided at all costs. Yet, while kids are supposedly being harmed, the government is the one benefiting, collecting million-dollar fines. Children are the pretext, but not the beneficiaries. While there's no doubt that social media can be harmful, treating everyone as a fragile victim undermines personal responsibility and shifts liability from users to service providers. This opens the door for exploitation. There are plenty of people that would deliberately circumnavigate age verification to provoke fines against platforms they dislike, say targeting Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. The opportunities for fraud are endless, especially when you've got the government's blessing. What happens if companies refuse to comply? Well, they could lobby the government to get the rules changed, or they could refuse to pay the fines as they see them as unjust, in which case the Australian government could block offending websites and prevent you from accessing them. And if you think that sounds far-fetched, look up the Great Firewall of China. It blocks access to millions of websites for billions of people. And China has been giving big compliments to our current government. Maybe in the name of solidarity, China will provide some advices to the Australian government on how to handle digital identities and access to the internet. Supporters argue that banning kids from social media will reduce bullying and improve mental health, highlighting benefits to cognitive and social development from less screen time. These concerns are valid. Research by Twenge, a psychology professor at San Diego State University, studied over 500,000 adolescents and found heavy social media use correlates with increased anxiety, depression, and body image issues. Public sentiment largely favors these measures, particularly among mothers, teachers, and the older generations. However, critics question whether teenagers will bypass restrictions by switching to new platforms, which would defeat the purpose of this bill and leave adults to bear the burden of digital identity. Swimming has risks, but we don't ban teenagers from the beach, we teach them how to swim. That's why in Finland, 10 years ago, they took a different approach. They taught media literacy in schools, focusing on how to critically analyze content, identify biases, and evaluate sources. A simple question like, who filmed this supposedly freak event, can reveal fake news in seconds. This ultimately leads to well-prepared and well-adjusted young adults, who are not so easy to manipulate. It's a classic case of teaching people not what to think, but how to think. The constant insertion of government into parenting decisions is presumptuous and usurping. I'm in full support of privately led initiatives such as Time Well Spent movement or Scroll Free September to encourage people of all ages, not just teenagers, to make proactive steps to limit screen time. I spend way too much time scrolling through YouTube and I'd be better off reading a book or going to the gym. These initiatives promote healthier habits without resorting to coercion. So what can we do? First of all, vote according to your principles. If you like this bill and you want to support the parties that promote it, here they are. If you want a party that will vote against this type of legislation, then think of these guys next time you're in the voting booth. As you can tell, my bias is against this bill. So you should keep that in mind when thinking about the information and arguments that I've presented here. I'm trying to represent both sides so that you have maximum information and can make up your own mind, but I'm only human. Normally, I'd tell you to make a submission to the Senate Standing Committee on Environment and Communications, but the window for that has already closed. They allowed only 24 hours for feedback. This is highly unusual and definitely insufficient for meaningful public input. But that doesn't mean you can't act. Rebel News has created a website that helped defeat the misinformation bill by generating over 20,000 emails. Go to killthebill.com.au or check the link in the description. It's fast and effective and I've used it. And remember, you were born free, but soon you might be born with a digital identity. So.